When I first learned about the partisans about 12 years ago, I was very interested in this idea of Jewish resistance and wondered why it did not have more of a centerpiece in Jewish history and teaching of the Holocaust. This was an especially important point for me because I teach to Jewish children, and not just the Holocaust, but much of Jewish history can be very depressing for them. And I wanted something that would use that history, but turn it into something that would inspire my students to want to work to make sure that the events of the Holocaust didn't happen again to anyone, much like was earlier mentioned. And teaching about Jewish resistance, particularly the Belsky partisans, who not only fought back, but saved Jews of all ages, was my answer. And since that time, the stories and lessons of these courageous Jewish partisans has been central to my teaching. As a result of this passion for the partisans and connections made with other Jewish educators and Holocaust educators, as Tamara said, I was invited to the first reunion of Belsky partisan descendants in 2019. And I was so excited to get to go to Novogrodik and to the Nalabaki forest and see the camp and the woods and have my own pictures rather than trying to describe them to my students each year. I met my first Belsky actually in the Minsk airport waiting for my ride when I discovered I was sitting next to Robert. I informed him that in my classroom, his father and uncles were heroes. Upon arriving in Novogrodik, I met Aaron and Henrika Bell, as well as I connected with Ellie Rabinowitz, who was already working with me to come to Australia and teach there about the partisans. We all got to know each other and enjoyed the hospitality of the priest who was in charge of the hostel where we were staying. Aaron and I bonded quickly, and we continued to talk throughout the 3 days. So you've already heard about a couple of these young men. This is my favorite picture from the trip. It was taken before I had met any of these Belsky descendants. From the left is Lola's grandson. In the middle are Bella's 2 sons, and on the right is Tuvia's grandson. I like to think that they embody the spirit of their ancestors in this photo. And I can picture the train tracks blowing up behind them. Oria Rubin in particular welcomed me, and by the end called me Achot, sister, which brings me to the title of my presentation, Partisan or Tunnel. Throughout the reunion, when I met someone new, they would ask, tunnel or partisan? Meaning, why are you here? What is your connection to this and to me? My answer each time was neither. I am a history teacher who's taught about the Belskys for 12 years. By the second day, I found out that I had become the famous American historian, but I actually preferred Achot. Prior to my visit, I had not been aware of the escape from Novogrodik, and I found the story so amazing and couldn't wait to bring it back to my classroom. I have added it now to my unit on resistance, and my students have used the materials, many put together by Tamara from the event, as well as my photos in their research and work on partisans. It was so inspiring to hear how the presence of the Belskys in the forest allowed many of those who escaped to survive because they had somewhere to go and to be safe. This photo is Aaron and Tamara speaking. It's Aaron speaking to the whole gathered group. And I clearly remember what Aaron said here, and it's similar to what Henrika was trying to get him to say at the beginning. He said, we were not the most educated or the smartest. We knew the woods and we knew how to live off of them. Our father told us, go into the woods and survive, and we did. This short statement makes clear that those who survived did so because of their familiarity with the area, as Bella has mentioned, their knowledge of the land and the peasants in the area. This is true in story after story of Jewish partisans. We often think of Jews as urban and well-educated, but in Poland, Belarus, Ukraine, Lithuania, many of the Jews were peasants living in rural and heavily wooded areas, and those woods saved them. On the second day, we journeyed to the site of the Belsky camp. It is near the village of Nalabaki. I was so taken in by the warm and traditional welcoming given by the town to this group of Jewish people who had descended from the Jews that used to live in their area that had largely been rounded up and murdered. This group of traditional singers and dancers welcomed us both on our way to the camp and afterwards. The mayor welcomed us with this amazing and beautiful loaf of bread. It really was heartwarming to see how much the community wanted to make people who could have been their neighbors feel welcome. And speaking of what could have been, this is another one of my favorite photos, the one on the bottom. This is Uriah Rubin in the bus stop in Nalibaki with a group of locals on their way to work or shopping. Uriah asked me to take this photo and we talked about that this could have been his bus stop if things had been different. The other photo is from our second welcome by the group. Aaron is standing with his back to us. This was before they served us a partisan lunch made with local food, produce, and including a very healthy dose of homemade vodka. The food was delicious and the welcome was honest and warm. When we went into the camp, I wandered off by myself. Oops, sorry, wrong. Lost the page here. Arriving at the camp was pretty emotional for me. I was really so excited to see this place that I had been teaching about. The sign on the right is at the entrance. On the left is a map of the camp created by a student of mine just a few months before my visit. The next fall, I showed this photo to the student who had made the map, and he was so excited to see what he had made in the place that it was a map of. When we got to the camp, I wandered off by myself. I wanted to be alone with my thoughts and discover this place in quiet. I wandered the whole length of the site and off the path as well. There was evidence of the use of this place to be found if you were looking closely. I found what is likely a small underground storage site as well as some metal artifacts. You could tell where the Zemlyankas, the underground bunkers, had been by looking carefully to see where the ground was sunken or where newer trees were growing. It was peaceful and still in the forest, and I was able to picture it as the place of refuge and safety that the Belsky camp provided. While we were at the site, I helped Sharon, Tuvia's granddaughter, put up a mezuzah on one of the trees along the main path. She had brought it with her on a previous visit, but was unable to hang it due to rain. Lola and her grandson are pictured touching the mezuzah. That's the bottom right-hand picture. The most magnificent part of the visit was dancing and singing in the middle of the camp. A picture of Bella and Shachar dancing with the remnants of the Jewish community from this area. Watching the children and grandchildren of Jews whose lives had been saved in these woods dance and sing in Hebrew and Yiddish was such an amazing experience. It was an irrefutable statement of the failure of those who sought to annihilate us completely. It has been my intention to return to Nalibaki to help with the preservation and exploration of the campsite. This sadly has not been able to happen the last couple of years, but I am hopeful I will be able to go soon. Meanwhile, my connection to this story is kept alive in my classroom. The bottom picture is Lola and Bella with two of the women who worked in the kitchen who actually knew the family that had hid Lola. She was sharing pictures, which I think I'm holding in my hand. I work to pass on to the next generation the stories of the partisans and to use them to inspire my students to know that one person can make a difference, can save many lives, or maybe only one. But in Jewish teaching, one life is a whole world. My students learn about the struggles of the partisans. Here are two fifth graders with a model of a Zemlyanka that they made while learning about the Belskis for a Jewish Heroes unit. My eighth graders learn that Jews did not all go like lambs to slaughter, but rather for people dehumanized, starved, and hunted, many fought back bravely, not just to save their own lives, but to interrupt the Nazi war machine and, when necessary, fight. These quotes are from my students' work at the end of our unit on resistance. They learn about unarmed and armed resistance, partisans and ghetto fighters, as well as those who taught children in secret and stole from camp workshops to make a Hanukkah to light at Hanukkah. Clearly, learning about the partisans has a huge impact on my students. Viktor Frankl says the last thing that can be taken from us is the choice of how we respond to or act in a moment. The Belskis made a choice not just save themselves, as the top quote states, but to save others as well. Every old Jewish woman saved is a victory against Hitler. I'd like to read the bottom one, beautifully written by an 8th grader last year. I visualize the heart of humanity as a thumping, pulsing light. It dims, but is never fully extinguished. Over time, dark cosmic cracks have appeared in the outside. Often, there are scars that split from one side to another. One in particular is deep, way down into the heart of humanity. That fissure is the Holocaust. It is the murder of 6 million Jews and 6 million more. However, something fascinating would happen to the crack every so often. The fissure would still expand, but then a little piece of it would glow again. That part of the scar wasn't quite gone. The line was still there, but the light had returned to the dark. I believe each partial healing to be an act of armed, spiritual, or religious resistance. Each time someone showed a part of humanity, the heart of humanity reacted. The heart will never be perfect. There are scars and fissures beyond repair, but there are bleak areas that will glow from time to time. This glow is a result of a person doing what the partisans and Jews and many others did during the Holocaust: fix humanity, make the world a better place. Over 1,200 Jewish souls walked out of the Nalabaki forest on July 10, 1944. Over 1,200 worlds saved. Learning this gives young people hope and inspiration that, quite frankly, I hope they never have to actually use, but will work to continue to instill in them. L'chaim.
It's so nice to see the cup, which we made a symbol of our union.
I have to tell you, Tamar,
yeah.
Talking about perspective, when COVID began a little over 2 years ago, and I was in my house and about to begin teaching remotely and going into quarantine and lockdown, one of the things that sat at my workspace in my home was that Belsky Partisan Cup. And I would tell myself when I was feeling whatever about our current situation, at least I'm not sleeping in a zemlyanka in the Polish woods in the winter. And it was good to have perspective and realize I was pretty darn comfortable and I'd be okay.
Exactly. These illusions, this connection of what happens to us in our everyday life and in our society today to what happened to them makes it easier for us to live, to survive today. That's for sure. That's my feeling too. Thank you very much.